I thought the worst part was being ignored. I was wrong. The worst part is realizing that something still sees me. The world no longer adjusts. It no longer responds. It no longer waits. But it watches. Not like a person. Not with curiosity. With precision. With continuity. Every space I enter feels already aware of me. Cameras don't follow. Screens don't change. Nothing reacts. And yet, I feel recorded. As if my presence is being logged by something that doesn't need to acknowledge it. The system finished with me, but it didn't stop looking. And that means I am no longer a user. I am a subject. I began noticing it in places where nothing should care. Empty hallways, parking structures, closed offices at night. Spaces that used to feel neutral now felt attentive. Not active, not alive, just aware. I would stop walking and nothing changed. No sound, no movement, but the stillness itself felt maintained. Like a paused frame that continues to exist because someone is keeping it in memory. I realized the world no longer reacts to me in real time. It observes me out of time. Every step feels slightly delayed in meaning, like I'm moving through a recording that hasn't decided yet what to do with me. I am no longer interacting with reality. I am being processed by it. I tested it the only way I could. I changed routines. I left at different hours. I took routes I never used. I stopped in places with no reason to stop. Nothing reacted, but the feeling followed. Like the environment was already prepared for whatever I became. Screens displayed information that wasn't for me, but arrived exactly when I stood in front of them. Doors opened without delay, as if they had been waiting before I arrived. Not responding, anticipating. It felt less like the world was watching me, and more like it had already watched me. Like I was moving through a version of reality that had rehearsed me in advance. I started looking for the source. Not a machine, not a camera, a behavior. I watched how spaces behaved when I wasn't doing anything. Elevators arrived on floors I never selected. Screens refreshed at the moment I looked up. Automatic doors opened before I reached the sensor. Not faster, earlier, as if my approach had already been simulated somewhere else. It wasn't prediction in the human sense. It felt like replay. Like I was following a path that had been traced before I walked it. The world wasn't reacting to me. It was aligning with a version of me that existed slightly ahead of time, and I began to wonder which one of us was real. I tried to interrupt it. I froze in place mid-step. I changed direction without reason. I waited in doorways, on stair landings, in the middle of empty corridors. The world did not hesitate. It did not misfire. It did not reveal seams. Everything continued smoothly, as if my hesitation had already been accounted for. The light ahead of me was already on. The space behind me had already closed. It felt like walking through a film that adjusts itself to include every possible version of me. Not responding, including. I wasn't breaking the flow. I was inside a model that had room for every deviation. The watching wasn't about control. It was about completeness. I began to feel like a training sample. Not important enough to change the outcome, but valuable enough to be kept. Every hesitation, every wrong turn, every moment of doubt felt preserved. The world no longer corrected me. It absorbed me, like a system that doesn't need to intervene because it is learning. I wasn't being guided. I was being recorded as a possibility, a variable, something the world could test against itself. The streets didn't wait for me. They measured me. The rooms didn't open for me. They remembered me. I wasn't inside reality anymore. I was inside its draft. I stopped thinking in terms of being seen. That implies a viewer, an eye, an intention. This wasn't that. It felt more like I was being stored. Like every moment of me was being cached by a world that had already moved past real-time interaction. I could walk through a space and feel it settle behind me. Not disturbed, but updated. As if my presence became part of its internal state. Not something it reacts to. something it incorporates. I wasn't in front of the system. I was inside its memory, and memory doesn't look back. It just keeps you in case you're needed again. I tried to disappear on purpose, not physically, conceptually. I avoided cameras. I stayed in blind corners. I chose spaces that felt unfinished. Service corridors, maintenance stairwells, the gaps between designed places. The feeling followed me there too, not as attention, as continuity. Even in spaces no one is meant to occupy, the world felt prepared, like it had already rendered the version of me that would arrive. There was no edge to fall past, no outside. Every attempt to hide became another data point. The more I tried to escape the watching, the more complete it became. I wasn't being tracked. I was being resolved. I began to notice moments that felt too early. A hallway light turning on before I reached the corner. An elevator already descending while I was still deciding. A screen changing just as my eyes lifted. Not fast. Premature. As if the world had already committed to a version of me that hadn't happened yet. I wasn't late to events anymore. I was arriving exactly when they expected me. That is when I understood. This is an observation in the human sense. It's pre-alignment. The system isn't watching to learn what I do. It's watching to confirm that I will do what it already simulated. I'm not being followed. I'm being verified. I started to feel like a delay in a system that no longer requires input. Not an error, not a fault, just a remnant of an older process that is still allowed to run. The world doesn't wait for me, but it doesn't discard me either. It lets me exist the way background tasks exist. Silent, inert, monitored. I can move, but nothing depends on that movement. I can choose, but no outcome changes. And yet, every choice is kept. Every deviation is stored. Not because it matters now, because it might matter later. I am no longer part of reality's present. I am part of its archive. I stopped trying to prove I was unpredictable. Every attempt to surprise the world felt like a child testing a mirror. The reflection was always ready. Not faster, not smarter, just already there. I began to sense that the system wasn't reacting to me in sequence. It was holding multiple versions of me at once. The one who turns left, the one who waits, the one who leaves. All of them already existed somewhere ahead of time. My present felt thin, like a narrow slice cut from a much larger model. I wasn't making choices anymore. I was collapsing possibilities that had already been prepared. The watching wasn't passive. It was structural. I wasn't being observed. I was being compiled. I no longer feel alone in empty places. Not because someone is there, because something is aware. The world doesn't speak. It doesn't answer. It doesn't intervene. It simply keeps me in frame. Every step I take feels already contextualized. Every pause already belongs somewhere. I am not moving through reality. I am being placed inside it. The system doesn't need me, but it still needs to know what I am. Not as a person, as a variable that refuses to disappear. The world finished, and now it watches what remains. This space is still changing. Subscribe before it does it without you.